Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're live. This is Matthew Struck with my, as always, partner in crime, Precious. How you doing, Precious?
I'm good. How are you today?
I am fantastic, fantastic. So this is Sell Like a CPCU for anyone who is new to this episode or this broadcast. This is put on in partnership with the Agents and Brokers Interest Group for the CPCU Society. Really quickly, before we introduce our guest, who is going to be a fantastic guest for us today, but before we do, I have to take care of some business. If you're watching this live, we can definitely take your questions and comments live. If you're watching this on record, or even if you are watching this live, please like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell so that every time we do go live with Sell Like a CPCU, you get notified. So without too much more ado, we are joined by Amber Wuollet from Bold Penguin. How's it going, Amber?
It's going great. How are you guys?
Pretty good, pretty good.
We're excited to have you.
Glad to be here.
Before we were live, Precious and I were reminiscing about 2020 and being within spitting distance of the end of the year. How has 2020 been for you in your experience?
A complete roller coaster.
Yeah.
I was actually in Hartford launching a big campaign at the airport there when we got the word of the shutdown orders. So there's this very dramatic moment of, wow, everything is changing. We knew things were happening and coming, but it was definitely that moment of, wow, this is going to be a year unlike any other. And it definitely has been that. Bad, obviously, with the pandemic. Just trying to make the best of it. And yeah, just try to take every opportunity as a challenge.
If you notice, your fanboy, Tony Konyitz, is watching. Yeah, so, full disclosure for everyone, if they don't know who you are, Amber, just give them 1 or 2 minutes on, who you are, what you do, and kind of your role within, at Bold Penguin and within the insurance industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently a director of marketing at Bold Penguin. So commercial insurance facing Insurtech. So the first 10 years of my career on the carrier side and underwriting ops, which is where I always say I became an insurance nerd through and through. So I'm very active in the industry from that sense. You may have seen me in my video series, The Insurance Nerdery, at Insurance Nerds events, which I'm very passionate about. So I love all things insurance. So it's a treat to be here today and chat with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, and we even got we have Heather Blevins tuning in, watching. I don't know if Amber, if you know Heather, but Heather is my co-host at 5:30 Eastern this evening for How to CPCU. So she's checking in a little bit early, probably getting in the mood. So, but
love it.
So Precious, you have a little bit of a background in Insurtech too, right?
Yes, and I'm not even sure if you were aware, Matthew. So what was it, just last year, Amber, at the GIS conference down here in Dallas, that, Amber was the keynote, and I got to grace the same stage that she did during the Insurance Nerds Day stuff. So that was the first time I was able to meet her in person, and try not to do a complete fangirl. I didn't have her sign a deck page or anything. So, it was...
That was the epic. I would love to sign a deck page.
It was, yeah, exactly. But no, it's interesting because I think we all, to a degree, kind of run the same circles. And so whenever you're able to reconnect and collaborate, and then also earlier this year, Amber was gracious enough to invite me along on the hashtag, the Share the Mic Insurance. So I was able to post some content. Well, I created some content that she boosted on her LinkedIn. So we, the Insurtech space is one that's pretty interesting, and we all, for the most part, kind of follow and cheer on everyone else.
Awesome. Yeah. So Amber, you're kind of like placed within. Let's talk before we get into Bold Penguin. You're placed within the insurance nerds. How should I put it? Like universe, as if you were a cartoon character or a comic book character.
Superhero.
Like how did that come to be, and kind of what are you doing with it right now?
Yeah, great question. So I often think there's just a mix of serendipitous events that led me to where I am today, and a big part of that is Insurance Nerds. So when I left the carrier space and moved over to sort of the tech and data side of the industry, one of my fears was like, what if I lose my industry geekery knowledge? I'd spent 10 years immersed in policy language and rating, and I got to work on some really fun projects at American Family, working on rating structures and discounts and policy language, underwriting guidelines. I didn't want to lose that. So I decided to start a video series, which I called Explore Insurance. And it really, I felt like, would both force me to stay current on changes and trends, and also expand my network. I could interview people, talk to people at conferences. So I started doing that. At the same time, I met the three original insurance nerds, Carly, Nick, and Tony, in just different occasions. I think I met Nick first at a conference in, I think it was the Des Moines GIS in 2019. And then Carly actually joined my team where I was working at Explore at the time. And then I met Tony and ended up spending a lot of time in Columbus. So long story short, it all kind of came together. And I had met the infamous John Bachman, my Insurance Nerdy co-host at Insurance Nerds Days. All of it came together. We thought, why don't we join forces and make some really fun videos about insurance? And I'm a huge fan of what the Insurance Nerds is trying to do in the industry, to bring it to the next generation, make it more inclusive, create a community. And I'm really, really passionate about that. And I feel like it has helped me both expand my network and stay current. So it's definitely fulfilled its goal and more than I could have ever dreamed when I first started making videos.
Awesome. Yeah. Tony said specifically that I need to ask you this, so don't kill the messenger, but I'm supposed to ask you when exactly are you finishing your CPCU?
Probably
no pressure.
2042, I think.
2042.
It's been in the works a long time. I told myself once I finish my MBA, then I'm diving into the CPCU. But yeah, it's a long road. I'm in the some CPCU groups on social media, like on Facebook. So I always see the post, and it always motivates me. Like, okay, I got to get my next test scheduled.
And in true superhero fashion, it looks like the rest of your compatriots in crime here are like hearing the call of the.
This is amazing.
Hearing the call of a teammate.
Yeah, the bat signal.
Which, by the way, we're gonna have to get Bill on here at some point, because I would love to find a way to get his claims and his coverage language knowledge imparted to folks that are on the selling side of the industry. I think that would be big time valuable. But all right, so what we are really here to talk about is Bold Penguin and your role over there. What would you say at the core of what Bold Penguin is? I mean, what is it, kind of, for anyone who is completely unfamiliar with the company?
In a word or a phrase, I would say Bold Penguin is essentially the pipes of small commercial. So kind of like a technology pure play in the middle of a really complex, really fragmented industry. So our goal is to build sort of like that human-centric, human-focused technology that empowers each of the players along the way. And that's actually one of the things that drew me to Bold Penguin. So I was on the carrier side when Insurtech, the whole movement started launching, 2015, 2016. And there was so much talk about, you carriers, you underwriters, you agents, you're dinosaurs, you're going away. And obviously, as someone who was one of the dinosaurs, it was messaging that didn't really connect. And I saw a few voices that were saying the opposite. And Bold Penguin was one of them that came out saying, we are not here to replace anyone. We believe in agents. We believe in carriers. And we believe in small businesses. And we just want to connect them and help the whole ecosystem work better. We're just the technology in the middle, making it happen. And that was really what initially drew me. So I was kind of a Bold Penguin fangirl, for a couple of years, watching from a distance, like, man, they're doing some really cool stuff over there. So really, it's just been an immense joy. I joined Bold Penguin, I guess, August 2019, so a year and some change. And it's been an amazing journey just to see what's possible in small commercial. And our founders were agents. So they lived it. They lived the challenge of trying to write small commercial. How do you spend, 6-10 weeks writing a piece of business when you're going to get, a $1,500 premium from it, like a personal lines level premium, but commercial lines level time investment, it just doesn't work for anyone. So how do you use technology to enable each of those stakeholders and just make it work? So that's what Bold Penguin's all about.
I appreciate that. I think we've talked about this before, Precious, like the synergy between tech and the agent, right? Where you can't necessarily get rid of that relationship piece of the business, but you need tools to be able to grease the wheels, right? So that, or how should I put it, lower the friction is maybe another good word.
Yeah, so that advisors can get back to what we do best, because I think that that's kind of the interesting dynamic is that oftentimes from a personality standpoint, your producers are typically, they're relationship builders, and so they're the hunters. So they're out there, finding prospects, shaking hands, getting in front of people. And that's really where you want your people to be, is in front of people. But then there's this piece of it that just becomes very manual and just very anticlimactic because now that you've hunted and now that you've got to process it, right? And so that I think is the dynamic in most agencies, is that you have the producers on the front line bringing in the prospects, and then typically you have a service team or CSRs or someone who kind of help with the perpetuity, the servicing and the renewals and things like that. But normally the producers, once they kind of, I used to always describe it as get it to the yes, right? So their job is to get someone to commit to moving forward. And then there's just so much stuff that has to happen. And so that stuff, those inefficiencies from the yes to the binder and, getting in, or, even when you have someone who's willing to have the conversation with you, so now you've been out there and you've been networking and showing up at events and you've done all these things, and you have someone that says, hey, let's do business. Unless there's a reason why we shouldn't, I'm fully, on board with buying, whatever it is you want to sell. And that's music, right? As a producer, you're like, yes. The most embarrassing thing is when you've done all of this work to build this relationship, and then you hit a brick wall because you're like, I don't even know where to take this to. I don't know anyone who'll do this. How do I go back to them and tell them? It's not that you're uninsurable. It's just that I don't have options. So all of these tools, that's that arsenal that makes, the rest of it, possible. Because what I love about, the model of Bold Penguin is that even if you do secure a relationship and they're out of appetite, maybe they're in a state you're not working in, or maybe they're, something that you don't do daily, that you still have the ability to monetize these relationships, and so I tell the producers that I work with all the time, the most professional and the kindest thing that you can do is to give a no fast. Right? I'm not going to waste your time. I appreciate the opportunity. But with that no, if you can be even more helpful, right? We've all been out and about and maybe shopping in person, and you're like, hey, can you tell me where the dressing room is? And you have certain places that they'll just point. Go head that way until you, and then you run into usually the higher end places that say, hey, let me take you there. And so Bold Penguin gives the agency the opportunity to say, I'm not able to work with you. However, rather than saying, yeah, good luck, Google that, you can make an introduction to somebody who, again, is better positioned to really, deliver for that client. And it's a win-win because the client walks away still feeling very, very well taken care of. But then also from a referral standpoint, they may have someone who is in your wheelhouse and they're saying, hey, I really appreciated the fact that you were able to identify early on that it wasn't a good fit, that you were able to get me over to someone who inevitably took care of me, but the professionalism, because, we tend to sometimes as agents have this pile up mentality, like we're playing a football game where you just want to cover the ball. And and sometimes if you don't have really great solutions, you burn a bridge, So again, this is the win-win where you can monetize it and the customer still has that positive experience and takeaway that they're going to be, taken care of.
It sounds like, Amber, you need to send Precious a request for like an online review or something to throw on the website.
I have a spokesperson here. That's better than I can.
Well, so the one question I was going to ask is, and I think Precious has hit on a lot of it, but kind of like at its essence, there's kind of like a dual value proposition, right? That Bold Penguin provides to the brokers. What is that exactly?
Yeah, and I think Precious hit on a lot of those key points, is that small commercial, it works better when it's connected. And we talk a lot about commercial connectivity, and it's connecting the pieces so that each player wins. And if you're an agent and you're trying to write a piece of business, obviously the ideal outcome is you write that piece of business. And with our technology, you can do that a heck of a lot faster. So that's one key point, is using our agent technology. We have one underwriting master question set. So, we've got all of our carriers. We had all of this distilled down to one question set that adjusts as you go through it. So you're not filling out, 6 different applications. You're filling out one application. We have all the carrier questions worked in there. You're getting the business class identified very quickly, the natural language processing, and then you're getting to that quote really, really quickly. So that's one piece of it. And then, as Precious mentioned, if you aren't able to write that piece of business, or it's not the kind of business that your agency is looking to specialize in, you can, at any point, you can put it back into our exchange, where, of course, you're compensated, and then we connect that business with the coverage and the agency that is ready. And that's all built into the system. There's over 19,000 NAICS codes to identify the different business classes, and we've mapped all of them. All the carriers have told us, we will write these 8,742 NAICS codes. So there's no guesswork. It's all built into the system. And then if you want to receive business, we can do that too. So on the flip side, say you're like, I want to write a bunch of landscapers this year, landscapers and restaurants and hair salons. Well, we can hook you up. So on both ends, it helps growth across the spectrum with both efficiency and that prospect exchange, which is sort of the cornerstone of what we were initially built on.
No, so anecdotally, I've seen both ends of that value proposition. Where I came from, I wasn't really tasked with writing a lot of small commercial. In fact, our small commercial department really was just kind of the odds and ends that came from the middle market and the large market pieces that got written. And the problem with that is, your middle market and your large market, you might operate, depending on what your broker commission breakdown is, you could operate at a 30% or 40% profit margin. And then small commercial, you're operating at like 5 or 10, right? Because it's really labor intensive and stuff. This gives you the opportunity, if you really are focusing on that middle and large market P&C business, to kind of still capitalize off of it, but not have to dedicate too much expense. So you can actually end up with a more profitable operation. Then on the flip side of that, what's also decent is you guys are working to fill a gap that I think has always been a manual process within the industry, where these larger brokers were having to collect these relationships manually with the brokers that were happily writing small commercial and BOPs and things like that day after day. This provides more of an automated or at least a central marketplace or meeting place for that to happen. I can't tell you how many times, the big producer in the shop brought in, this $1,500 premium piece of business, and it was going to have to get written E&S or something like that. Yeah. And the small commercial sales director was just like, I'm not going to make any money off of this. Like, this is going to be, and the producer. The producer's like, oh no, this is the stepping stone to $100,000 commission, and we have to write this. But I think to Precious's point too, that warm handoff has a huge amount of value. It has a huge amount of value because even if you're not capitalizing off of the business, you're still showing that value to the client. That's also kind of selfless in a way, which is fantastic. You guys partner with Ask Kodiak, right? Like on those NICS codes on the back end, are you doing all that mapping, or you also kind of have some strategic partnerships in the Insurtech world as well?
So we do the mapping ourselves, but certainly we have a number of partnerships throughout the ecosystem. And a big part of that is figuring out which, what's the next technology that's going to take it to the next level. And that's something that we definitely never rest on, is how do we make it faster? How do we make it even more efficient? So continuing to build out those things. And, when we talk about an exchange, we don't need to have, 100 BOPs on each, on a platform. But our main metric is how many businesses successfully got coverage. So what do we need to plug those holes? So one really exciting launch this year was E&S, because as we're seeing more and more businesses, especially with the hard market, with COVID, with business innovation, are falling into that E&S space, which you all know, it's incredibly complex to navigate, especially if you don't write a ton of E&S. Right. So we have that built in. We have the declinations built into the system. We've got the E&S carriers built into the system. So that was one area we're always looking at. Okay, so who couldn't we help, and how do we help them? What carriers do we need? What coverages do we need? And we're constantly building that out.
Awesome. So I do want to go back to, you were talking about like, what is the ROI on small commercial, Matt? You were saying, again, that's part of what makes it, unattractive to certain, certain agencies that are maybe targeting some of the bigger, the whales, right? And so I always joke about, when you go fishing, there's the minnows. And there's the whales, the gestation of a whale is 2 years for a reason, because you got to wait on it, because when it comes through, it's going to be substantial. But if you catch enough fish, so I am, I cut my teeth on commercial in small commercial, so I'm always like, team small commercial. I love small commercial because you really have an opportunity with, small businesses to, again, provide those advisory, perspectives, because they don't necessarily, oftentimes as a broker, when you're working in that space, you become the risk manager for them, because they're too small to, oftentimes you're still dealing directly with the business owner. They don't have a risk manager on staff. And so you kind of become that via, the insurance product. And so what I've always found amazing, and I don't know if I've said it officially on every live cast we've done, but, in the PNC space, the same license that it takes to sell homes and autos is the same license that it takes to sell BOPs and umbrellas. And there's no requirement. So I think oftentimes, I think that small commercial is usually the first foray into the commercial space, And so when you are working with technology that kind of helps guide you and gives you, the questions to ask, the things to be aware of, especially for independent agents that, they're looking to grow their book in different ways, so we're all aware that as safety continues to get better, loss ratios, continue to improve, that, premiums are dropping, and not in a bad way. I know when I started, I was born in personal lines, and it was a lot of premium chasing. I think the bulk of what I did was following up on payments, whereas on the commercial side, it was kind of understood that you have to spend money to make money. So they had a better appreciation of, the insurance product, and more of an awareness versus just kind of the necessary evil that was compulsory because some third party told me I needed to pay you guys today, So in saying that, the happy medium is if you're able to leverage technology in order to get these to turn around quicker, then that increases your ROI, because you're not spinning your wheels as long for the same premium dollar. So working smarter and not harder is definitely the way forward, for people who are looking to grow in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you said, Amber, you're helping to pre-qualify this stuff too, right? Because a huge time sink in small commercial is just that pre-qualification, whether it be, by carrier or by line of coverage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're an agent and you're using our technology, you can see the carrier panel and you can see, drop off as you move forward. So you can see in real time, where it's falling off. And certainly, there's always the E&S path, but I think that's really key, is knowing where you're at and where the appetites are at. And that's constantly shifting, right? I mean, carrier A may take, roofers today, and then, next month they're tightening up their guidelines. So that's going to shift, and that's real time in our platform. All of those adjustments are made.
And you're also gauging the social proof of it, right? Like, you're not just what's the crude analogy? I mean, like, you're not just shooting with birdshot, right? Like, you're legitimately saying, okay, these are the carriers that we have partnerships with, or at least we have connectivity with. They all say they write BOPs for whatever, small retail storefront. But these 4 or 5 are the ones that seem to be the most successful. You're percolating those to the top, right?
It's a tailored match. And that's why I think one element that really sets us apart is that we're gathering tons of data to try to make the best experience possible and to make that match. There's no guesswork. We're not just throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks. And with our acquisition of Risk Genius, we're taking it even farther to really bring in that policy data, to really power that experience from start to end with robust data sets that get you to the exact coverage that you need as a business.
And anyone who's unfamiliar with Risk Genius, what is that offering, and kind of how is that going to integrate into Bold Penguin's kind of, portfolio?
Yeah, so Risk Genius is kind of funny. I was a huge fangirl of both Bold Penguin and Risk Genius prior to joining Insurtech. So it's just completely surreal to me still to be in the middle of of that marriage. It's absolutely incredible. So I actually also came from the personal line side, and policy language was a big part of what we did in underwriting. You think about coverage disputes, for example. You're looking at policy language. You're also assessing your exposure, and you're doing your search key, looking through policies, trying to find specific coverage. If we have an earthquake coming in an area we have an exposure in, okay, how many policies does that affect? And Risk Genius has AI built technology that does that for you. So it can manually scan or automatically scan through all the policy documents in the library, and present where you have those exposures. It can compare. So essentially, it is a really powerful tool that has incredible amounts of policy data, and policy language history. And that's really going to help us power our insurance intelligence division. So going beyond, just the one-time quote, but really powering the experience end to end. I mean, think about renewals, for example. How can we power that? What data is needed? How can we compare coverage? And again, it's all about making sure that the business has the best coverage, that is the most accurate coverage, and the agent can get them that without, manually scanning through, 12 different policies.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Awesome. I would you worry, Precious, if that's going to make us soft as insurance agents, that we have a computer doing policy analysis for us?
Well, I say with, again, technology is the tool, right? But, we're still the license and the accountable party, that it's going to guide you there and it's going to help you with the decision making, but you're going to still have to have some sort of professional wherewithal to be able to understand what it's telling you, right? So recommendation is only as good as how it's interpreted. And so, we can't, again, the AI is going to work at a pace much quicker than any of us are ever going to be capable of doing. And so that's the thing, that these become our again, weapons in our arsenal that are going to help make us more effective. So no, I don't think that it's ever going to supplant us. I mean, we're always going to be necessary, because now we have to take this and again, spend more time doing what we do best, which is the advisory piece.
Yeah.
That's just another tool, right? When I was an
Oh, yeah.
underwriter, my tool was a binder like yay big, full of policies. And I had, whenever I got a lot of questions, I would highlight it, like water backup. I would get that question a lot. So I had that policy language highlighted. Option 7, I remember, so anyway, I had like my
Things you can't
highlighter,
unlearn.
things that had a lot of questions on. Option 13. So anyway, those are like ingrained in my head now
Yes.
because that was my tool. So it's just a different tool, a faster
Speaking
tool
of
than a
tools,
binder.
I'm going to have to find it. I think it might be buried somewhere, but I think I still have my pro rata wheel. And I showed it to somebody once, and it just blew their mind. Like, what is this? I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, it kind of looks like an ovulation thing. I was like, no, it's
Love it.
And I said, so I've semi-retired my pro rata wheel. I've gone to a Julian calendar. And it was funny, I had explained to somebody how you use a Julian calendar and why it's so much more effective than poking calendar squares on your screen and trying to count the days between, two dates. But, it's interesting because as tools evolve, right, and we look at some of the tools that we used in the past, some of the tools that we cut our teeth on, I remember, and, I've shared, wow, they're still out there, Terrence. I might have to cash app you and have you send me an updated one. I don't even know if they're in production anymore. But when I was at State Farm in the beginning of my career, about once a month, we would get a packet that would come from home office, and it would be pages to replace in our manuals. And so you popped it open. We all remember that, right? It came like in this paper band, and you're like, flip to section such and such, pull those out, put this one in. And that was life, right? It had tables, it had these different things because we used to have to manually rate like the, jewelry policies. And you're like, hold on, is it set in pair? Do I add this? Do I add that? And it's funny because, of course, I say that now and people are like, how old are you? I was like, okay, I know there's a lot of gray, but I'm talking like early 2000s, man. I'm not talking about like, the original, policies, but tools change. And so, yes, we hold on to some of them because, those old school legacy tools, if you're well versed and if you're more effective doing it that way, by all means, but there's a better way, and so that's the whole concept. That's what Insurtech is all about, is let's look at these things and let's reconsider, why do we do it? And is there a better way to go about doing it? And the adaption of these things is always slow because as an industry, we're risk adverse, right? We're not going to jump on something and fear that it's the wrong direction and now we're going to have to embarrassingly roll it back. So as these things become available, and that's my hope, because of course the purpose of this is talking about sales as a CPCU. And so, we have the knowledge, we have the product knowledge, but a lot of us may not be exposed to or aware of all of these new offerings. You were talking about people not meeting in the right place. I remember I used to work for a company where we had to do the legal publishing that has to happen for certain things, so way in the back of the newspaper and small print that no one ever looks at, they have to put notices out there. And sometimes I feel like that's how insurance is. If you're in the know, if you're in these circles where things are happening, then you're like, oh yeah, of course, who doesn't know about Bold Penguin? Who doesn't know about Ask Kodiak? Who doesn't know about, these things? But if you're not in the know, how do you find out? And so these, bringing this information to, the masses, if you will, all those agents who are looking for a better way, this is the sort of stuff, this is that competitive advantage that is really winning deals for agencies.
Yeah. Well, this might also seem a little Darwinian, I guess I'll call it, but so it kind of helps in the sense that I have a firm belief that, you have to evolve over time as a professional, right? You're going to learn new things. You're going to adopt new tools. And this might not be a driving force of Bold Penguin. I mean, you can tell me whether it is or not. I don't think it is. But what it does fill, though, just kind of like incidentally, is that maybe like lower third of, salesy type producers who could care less about coverage form. I think what it's going to do is it's going to help raise the entire industry up by giving them a tool that kind of like fills in the gaps for them, and ultimately at the end of the day, our job is altruistic. It's to make sure that the policyholders have the coverage that they need and they expect, and communicate to them and kind of negotiate on their behalf as best as we can. And if you do have that kind of whatever, draw the line wherever you want, but that lower third of producers or whatever who's like just turn and burn, if Bold Penguin is offering something that it's not only more efficient, but it's also helping to fill in some of those gaps, I think that's a net positive for the industry. I could be off. And what are your thoughts on that, Amber?
Yeah, I think one thing that is so cool about the agency space in general is that you can have so many successful agencies who are doing things completely differently. Like there's no one agency model that wins the game. There's so many different approaches to it. And one thing that I find really exciting is that there's technology elements that work for all of them. So I think about like our agency technology, for example, there are agents that want market access. That gives them that. There are agents that have the access but need a tool that can do it, a lot faster. We've got that. There are agencies who are scaling back their appetite, who want to give in prospects and aren't able to write everything. We've got that. Agencies that want to supercharge their growth and take prospects that are tailored to their agency. We've got that. So you have all these different areas that agencies play in, and there's technology, not just Bold Penguin, of course, but there's in Insurtech, there's technology that can really fuel each one of those models. And that is just, I think, so exciting because it lifts us all up. So no agent, is spending 12 weeks writing a piece of business, which unfortunately sometimes is still the case for those hard to place businesses.
Yeah. And one thing that just came to mind with you saying that is that take an agency, first of all, like a mom and pop agency that might be behind on the tech curve. They can get up to speed really quickly by adopting a product or a service like Bold Penguin's providing, right? The other end of it is, say you're going in the opposite direction. Say you're trying to divest yourself of small commercial business. As opposed to letting all those BOPs just non-renew or BOR away or just kind of sit on them, you can actively put that stuff on the exchange as a means of divesting a piece or all of that book of business, especially if you don't have enough critical mass for anyone to look at purchasing it on a large scale. So, that couple dozen BOPs or something that you have, or that couple dozen E&S GL, monoline GL policies that you have sitting on the books, you can, at least capitalize on those in the near term and also find them a home that's going to be responsible for those clients. So I think that's huge. What direction do you see Insurtech heading in terms of small commercial? Is going to be more of the same, or is there something kind of like on the horizon that I think maybe none of us are paying attention to, or just only some of us, and a lot of us are going to kind of like just hear about it one day and it's going to be like the new normal?
I think one thing that we're seeing is a lot of consolidation and a lot of maturation. So, when I talk about the Insurtech movement and kind of witnessing the birth of it from afar in the carrier space, it seemed very hypothetical at the time. A lot of hype, not a lot of substance, a lot of money, of course. But what we've seen, over the last year or two, especially, is there is no patience for hype at this point. It needs to be actionable. It needs to be relevant. It needs to solve a real problem. I think that's really where we're going to it. And it needs to be able to be operationalized. It needs to fit within the existing structures to really get adoption. And I think that's another area that Bold Penguin has kind of stood apart from the pack a little bit. When I think about like the consolidation, Bold Penguin is, and one thing that I think is not as known, is sort of our commitment to neutrality, as we, would kind of phrase it, and that we're like operationally independent. We aren't beholden to any one stakeholder. We really work for the industry. So certainly there's benefits to, those consolidations and and all the different activity that you're seeing. But one thing that we're really committed to is being sort of like the Switzerland of insurance. We're in the middle, lifting everyone up. We're independent, and we're neutral, and we're really, as I mentioned in the beginning, like the pipes. We are the technology powering it in the middle.
But also, to your question, Matthew, as far as like the evolution of the small commercial landscape, these policyholders, I think nowadays are a little bit more savvy. I joke about old school commercial insurance where once a year you deliver the binder in person, you go play around at golf, whatever it is that you do. It was all in person and things like that. But now we know that we're living in the era of like the gig economy. You have these micro businesses, which are, they're within the small commercial realm, but they're not going to wait until 9 to 5 in order to request a quote. So you got to meet them where they live, right? And so because of that, I think a lot of agencies are starting to get a little bit more comfortable, maybe with the non-resident stuff, right? Because now when you can meet with a client and have a Zoom call or a consultation by phone, like people are a little bit more accepting of that. And so, now's a really good time to even expand territory. And so, getting in front of clients, being able to deliver the experience, but they don't look for the same things. So I guess my parallel example to that is years ago. So I actually lived in Wilmington, Delaware for a number of years. So super excited this time of year. MBNA. But while that was still a bank, I had tons of friends that worked at that campus, and that's where we would go to hang out because their gyms were awesome. They had like the marble, the granite, everything was like deep cherry wood. It just felt very opulent. Right. And so I remember being early in my career that to me, that lodgy kind of money feel was just very impressive, to me. And so fast forward, my first Insurtech gig, and I go to our home office and they've got like a beer keg and a ping pong table. It's in Chicago, so it has the whole loft feeling where you're seeing the rafters and all sort of stuff. And as I'm showing my age a little bit here, that was like the opposite of like the feeling that we when you walked into these very rich feeling spaces, you felt like you'd arrived. But nowadays, nope. They don't place that kind of value in that sort of stuff. So the same way we've kind of abandoned office decor as a representation of the company doing well, these policyholders, they don't want the fluff. They just want, as long as they know that they have, 24-hour access to something in the event something goes wrong. They want electronic access to policy docs because they don't want to have to call you when they need, to be able to do something. And so as their expectations change, we're going to have to adapt, And so I think one of the pieces of frustrations with what I call legacy agency owners is oftentimes when you have an agency that maybe built the bulk of their book in a different fashion, and so they're looking at their producers like, go out there and do it. I used to knock on doors and hand out flyers. And it's like, those things don't work anymore, And so as the consumer is a constant moving target, we've got to figure out ways to stay in front of them in the places where they've already expressed an interest of, I need to do this transaction. So it's timing, it's location, it's all of those things that as agency principals and owners, we can't chase that. And so if you leverage someone who specializes in that, then you can get back to the selling.
Yeah. And Amber, is Bold Penguin just getting, prospective insureds onto the marketplace from other brokers? Or do you also have an outreach, like an SEO program or something like that, that's attracting outside, potential clients that are coming onto the platform?
Yeah, so both. We prospects filter in from carrier partners, from broker partners, and our own SEO program. And yeah, I think you make a really relevant point, Precious, about those micro businesses. I was just thinking as you were talking, we see a ton of that. I actually do some call shadowing in our call center sometimes, and you hear a lot of 1 person, 2 person shops, gig economy. And the consumer expectations, especially in that niche of the industry, they're much more like personal lines than you would think. These are folks that are, they're not going to spend 6 weeks getting a quote. They're like, my expectation is I'm calling you and I'm going to get a quote and I'm going to get that bound. So the time expectations is so much more similar to the B2C space. Which is really fascinating. And that segment is really growing. I mean, businesses in general, the founding of new businesses is up pretty significantly. I think just a few weeks ago, Wall Street Journal reported that the number of new businesses being formed had hit like a 13-year high. So as we start coming out of COVID and people are innovating with new ideas that work in a virtual world, for example, a lot of these are really, really small and they're really unique and they don't necessarily fit into one bucket that's very familiar to us and to the industry. So I think that's a big piece, especially where agents can really come in handy is, using technology to service all those folks. And I mean, not to go, on too big of a tangent, but I mean, that's really the foundation of like what economic recovery is going to look like for the US. I mean, we're in it for the long haul with this whole COVID thing. So if the more we can support those entrepreneurs who are trying to find ways to survive in this intense environment, I mean, the better off the whole economy, and not just the insurance industry, but the whole economy will be in general. And agents are such a huge part of that.
Yeah. Well, that could also be a silver lining. Like, Precious, you and I were talking about you have to remember to take the good with the bad, right? Like you have to remember the problems and the loss of life and the difficulties and things like that of 2020. And also you have to understand the foundational things that you've learned and stuff. I think a lot of people, if they're inclined to look at the glass half empty, they're looking at all of these big companies restructuring, rethinking work from home, investing in IT infrastructure and laying people off and things like that. And it looks bleak if you only look at it from that lens. But I think the story that both of you are talking about and I would buy into is much more positive. And again, it could be, just me kind of looking at it through rose-colored glasses. But really that the whole gig economy and everything it's being built out at a perfect time because all of these people that maybe get downsized or there's a restructuring and they have a huge amount of skill, but they just have to find a different way to deploy it and use technology to do that. I think brokers need to roll with that or even anticipate that shift and find tools like Bold Penguin that are out there that are going to help them, provide those services that are going to be, mutually beneficial to both of those groups, I don't know. Am I being too Pollyanna?
Well, I will say my experience has been that these new entrepreneurs, right? And so typically what happens is that they go into business and all of a sudden, of all the things that they considered with financing and all these different resources, they completely forgot about insurance. And so somebody taps them on the shoulder and says, I need a certificate. And they're like, where do I get that from? Like, well, do you have a policy? And they're like, well, I'll get right back with you. And to Amber's point, that's why the patience is low, because most of the time, by the time they reach out to you, there's already a need and someone somewhere is waiting for like proof of insurance and they didn't know that they were having to no, first I take an app and then I put it on an Accord and then I email it to someone and then eventually they look at it and then 5 days later, no, I really wanted like an instant turnaround. I've got my credit card. What do you mean I can't find?
The job is done and they're waiting to get paid. Yeah.
But
yep.
What I had heard over especially, like you mentioned, you have these, so these are, previously they were only personal lines consumers. Now they're being introduced to this whole concept of commercial insurance and they don't know where to go. So oftentimes their first stop is wherever they bought their personal insurance from. So they'll call their personal insurance auto carrier, for example, and say, hey, I need to add a commercial exposure. And depending on who you're insured with, that may be an endorsement or that may be a trigger for a non-renewal. You never know. And so now they're being told about commercial auto needs, or they're being told, unfortunately, that once you use those assets for commercial purposes, those are no longer covered under your homeowners, right? And so they're being told these things for the first time. And they're like, oh, I have a need for another product that I've never purchased before. And so I would hear from customers all of a sudden, like, thank you for calling me back. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I call you back? Well, the problem is now that they realize they needed commercial coverage, they go and with their, beginner minimum premium bot need, and they're knocking on the door of like the big three. Like, no, you don't go to Marsh for the bot. I mean, you probably can, but you know what I mean? So, so they're calling the major places, right? Like I joke about, if you have like a 401k you're rolling over that only has a couple $1,000s, you're probably not going to get into Morgan Stanley really easily, I mean, and so they don't even know where to go, right? So there's a lot of coaching that's necessary, but that is just, again, a sign of the times, is that more and more people, again, they face a layoff, they may have a severance, that now may be seed money that they now use to go out and do something. And also they have that recognition and appreciation that they don't want to be vulnerable to being hired and fired anymore. They're ready, and so that small commercial space is so crucial because they don't have the same understanding as someone who's on their 10th renewal. So you really have to explain to them, the ins and outs, which is why I love it. Because back to your point, as far as the altruistic part of it, this is really where you get to shine. This isn't just, oh, well, I have to get a competitive bid and whoever comes in 2% lower gets the deal. These are people that are saying, this is my life savings. This is my nest egg. And I'm entrusting you to help me make wise decisions. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously that's, what we're all passionate about, but being able to make it happen, because now that you're in front of them, now that they've trusted you to do this, you're like, great, I'll take care of you. I'm here for you. I hope.
Yep. Yeah. No, so I think those are all fantastic points. And that's definitely something that I think a lot of brokers out there are going, if they're not currently leaning into those trends, they're going to get caught, behind the curve. And that works in Bull Penguin's favor. I mean, you could always build these systems out on your own or try to. The amount of investment that goes into, your point, Amber, the amount of investment money that has to go into some of these insurtechs to get them up and running, is a lot. But that being said, even if you do try and kind of like create it on your own, you might be able to cobble something together. But if you get caught behind the 8 ball, I mean, Bull Penguin should be one of your first choices. It should be one of your first calls, basically, in order to get running. So I want to say thank you. I mean, I want to be respectful of your time. We're running up on almost an hour here. Any closing thoughts? And then if anyone wants to get more information on you and Bull Penguin, where can they look?
Yeah, absolutely. Such an honor to be invited on. Love what you guys are doing.
Very prestigious. Yes.
Huge fan of both CPCU and the whole CPCU organization in general. I really value this piece of like this. This is, as this is networking in current environment. This is knowledge sharing and cross pollination of knowledge. So I love it. And yeah, certainly, like everyone else, I'm on LinkedIn, so definitely feel free to reach out. I love connecting with others in the industry. Send me a connection on bullpenguin.com if you're interested. If you just want to learn more, hello@bullpenguin.com. You can just reach out. Whether you're an agent or a carrier or a broker, we can get you to the right person if you just want more information. And then, of course, we have a demo request button on our website. You can find us on there and follow us on LinkedIn. We try to be part of the voice of insurance. So we do videos and content and white papers and all that. So those would be my main pitches.
Awesome. Well, I think we're good. You got any final thoughts there, Precious?
Shameless plug. So the CPCU curriculum is all online. In this COVID environment, you can go online and knock out whatever remaining things that you have, because we want to officially you're already we're all in the same circle, so we embrace you already. But again, I'd be remiss, this is a CPCU platform, so Tony, I that was my second attempt to close.
Closing deals.
Always be closing. That's what we're about. No, definitely. You brought up our program for today. I'm pretty sure we probably have some increased viewership because of your presence. So we appreciate that. And as always, I know that we communicate often, but if there's anything that we can do, to support you, don't hesitate. Let us know.
Yep. 100% likewise.
Yep. Thank you. All right, everyone, have a good afternoon. Again, shameless plug. How to CPCU comes up at 5:30, and we'll be back at you next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, guys.